Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the mind where thoughts can unwind and curiosity drifts gently like a lantern on still water. Tonight, we're going to explore something many people experience yet rarely talk about for more than a fleeting moment. It's that soft jolt of familiarity, the almost whisper of recognition that arrives without invitation. That little shiver that makes you pause and think, I've been here before, even when you know with calm certainty that you haven't. We're exploring the strange and beautiful world of déjà vu, and the even larger landscape of how your brain perceives time itself. But before you settle in, if you enjoy these quiet explorations, feel free to give this video a like and subscribe, only if it feels right for you. It helps more wandering minds find their way here. And if you're still awake later, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the night. It's always comforting to imagine listeners from Hanoi to Helsinki, from Sao Paulo to Seattle, settling in under blankets or leaning back in a comfortable chair, all carried together by the soft current of curiosity. Now, whenever you're ready, feel free to dim the lights, maybe switch on a small lamp, or keep the room in a cozy half-darkness. Let your shoulders drop, let your breath slow. You don't have to focus too hard on any detail. Just let the story unfold around you like a gentle fog rolling over a quiet field at dusk. And if your thoughts begin to wander, or you drift somewhere between waking and dreaming, that's perfectly fine. We'll still be here, moving softly through the strange architecture of memory and time. Let's begin our quiet journey. You've probably experienced it at least once, perhaps even many times. You're walking through a hallway you've never seen before, or listening to someone tell a story you're sure you've never heard. And suddenly there's a gentle flutter in your chest, a brief pause, a strange familiarity that washes over the moment like a faint echo of a memory you can't quite reach. You know, rationally, that this place is new, that this moment is new. Yet something deep in your mind whispers, but haven't we stood here already? This is déjà vu, a feeling so soft and quick that it often leaves you wondering whether it truly happened at all. Scientists describe it in many ways, but the simplest description may be this: a moment that feels like it belongs to a memory, even though it doesn't. And for something so small and fleeting, it can be surprisingly powerful. Some people describe a tingling sensation behind the eyes. Others say it feels as though the air thickens slightly, or the world seems to tilt just a little, like a picture frame hung 5 degrees off-center. It isn't frightening, though, more like a quiet tug at the edge of awareness. What makes déjà vu so compelling is its emotional clarity. Even though you cannot place the memory, the feeling itself is strong. It feels crisp, almost precise, as if the moment has been stamped with a bright highlight of familiarity. And yet when you reach for the memory it promises, your mind offers only soft fog, no details, no images, just the feeling. It can be confusing, but it never lasts long. Déjà vu appears like a ripple in a pond and disappears before you can turn to follow it. Part of what makes the experience so mysterious is its universality. Déjà vu is not rare. It happens to billions of people across cultures, ages and lives. Teenagers feel it often. Adults feel it occasionally. Even older adults report soft echoes of it now and then. If you've ever wondered whether you were the only one who paused in the middle of a grocery aisle, or halfway down a staircase because a moment felt strangely familiar, rest assured, you're in good company. Many minds have wandered through this same odd doorway, and yet, for all its familiarity, déjà vu remains deeply misunderstood. Some people in earlier centuries believed it was a glimpse into past lives, or a sign of spiritual intuition. Others thought it might be connected to prophetic dreams, But as comforting or fascinating as those ideas may be, modern neuroscience has a much gentler, more grounded explanation. One that reveals the astonishing subtlety of the brain rather than mystical crossings of time. The truth is that your brain is constantly working quietly behind the scenes, stitching together sensory information, comparing what you see to what you've seen before, and weaving an ongoing story that feels smooth and continuous. Most of the time, this process is almost perfect. You don't notice the tiny gaps, the little adjustments, the rapid decisions your mind makes to keep your awareness steady. But occasionally, in a moment lasting no more than a heartbeat, the stitching slips. One thread falls just slightly out of place. A sensation meant to stay in the background steps forward a little too brightly, and you feel it. A moment that feels like a memory. There is something strangely comforting in knowing that déjà vu isn't a sign of something wrong, but a reminder that the brain is a living, breathing storyteller. It's constantly predicting, comparing, adjusting, and once in a while misreading its own script. Déjà vu is like when the storyteller accidentally flips back a page and reads a line twice, not out of confusion, but simply because the rhythm carried it there. And what's more, it's harmless. A normal, gentle quirk in an organ that processes billions of signals every second. No alarms, no warnings, just a fleeting reminder that the mind is more complex, more mysterious, and more quietly magical than we often allow ourselves to notice. As we drift further into this journey together, we'll take a closer look at how those predictions and comparisons work, how memory sits only a breath away from perception, and why the brain occasionally plays these small tricks on itself. But for now, simply let the idea settle softly in your thoughts. Déjà vu is not a glitch in the frightening sense. It's a wave passing through the ocean of memory, a momentary shimmer where time feels like it folds, just for a second, into something strangely familiar. Whenever you're ready, we'll move gently deeper into the world of memory and the quiet misfires that create these uncanny experiences. When people talk about déjà vu, they often whisper as though the experience belongs to some hidden corner of the universe, something mystical or perhaps even supernatural. In older traditions, it was sometimes seen as a sign of a past life brushing up against the present, like two pages of a book pressed so closely together that the ink from one faintly bleeds into the other. Others believed it might be a message from intuition, a quiet prophecy arriving before its time. These ideas are poetic, and they speak to the human desire to find meaning and mystery. But tonight, we'll gently set those interpretations aside, not to dismiss them, but to make room for something equally wondrous, the workings of the human mind itself. Because déjà vu, for all its strangeness, does not require past lives or psychic echoes to make it feel real. The feeling arises not from the supernatural but from the astonishingly subtle machinery of memory. And when you see how the brain builds familiarity, the experience of déjà vu becomes even more beautiful. It becomes a reminder that our minds are constantly composing our sense of time with quiet precision, like a musician tuning an instrument by ear. To understand déjà vu, we first need to understand the two ways the brain recognizes something as familiar. The first is quick and emotional. It's the warm glow of recognition, what scientists call familiarity. This feeling comes from an area deep in the brain known as the perirenal region. You don't need to remember specific details for familiarity to arise. It's more like stepping into a room and instantly sensing that the lighting, or the scent, or the overall atmosphere is known to you. It's a nod from your mind that whispers, "I've felt this before," even if it cannot say when. The second system is slower and more deliberate. This one belongs to the hippocampus, the part of the brain that retrieves actual memories. This is where details live. the shape of a doorway, the sound of footsteps on a particular staircase, the way sunlight landed on a certain afternoon. When this system wakes up, you don't just feel that something is familiar, you can explain why. You can point to a memory like a page in a photo album. Most of the time, these two systems work together seamlessly. The glow of familiarity and the story of recollection move in harmony, like two dancers in step, but déjà vu occurs when these dancers fall ever so slightly out of rhythm. You feel the glow, but the story is missing. Your mind answers the question, "Have I seen this before?" with a gentle yes, but when you ask where and when, the room falls silent. It's as though someone handed you a familiar key, but the lock it belongs to no longer exists. This mismatch, familiarity without recollection, is at the heart of déjà vu. It's not a prophecy or a glitch in reality. It is simply a moment when the fast system leaps ahead while the slower system stays just half a beat behind. In the peaceful quiet of a hallway or the passing murmur of conversation, the brain registers something as known before it can verify why. And because the brain dislikes gaps in understanding, the moment feels significant. It feels like a clue from somewhere outside the present. Another gentle misunderstanding we can release is the idea that déjà vu is a sign of a memory trying to return from the unconscious. People sometimes say, "I'm remembering something, but I can't place it," as though the mind has hidden a puzzle piece that's just out of reach. But déjà vu isn't a memory coming back. It's a memory process happening too quickly. Imagine your brain as a careful archivist who normally takes detailed notes before filing anything away. But every so often, the archivist scribbles a label before the page is written. The label says "already seen," but the folder is empty. When you glance at the label, you trust it, because it's yours. But when you open the file, there's nothing inside. That moment of emptiness, paired with an honest signal from your own mind, creates the uncanny sensation we call déjà vu. It also helps to recognize that déjà vu doesn't arrive at random. It tends to appear when sensory information resembles patterns your mind has encountered before. Not exact matches, just glimpses of similarity. The soft angle of a lamp, the colour of a staircase, the rhythm of someone's words. Your brain is a master at recognising patterns, and it often predicts what should come next based on experience. Most of this happens beneath awareness, like the tide shifting on a shore. But when a new moment resembles an old pattern closely enough, the prediction system may light up before the rest of the mind finishes comparing details. A false alarm of sorts, gentle, brief, and harmless. This also explains why déjà vu often appears when you're tired, stressed, or facing a rush of experiences. When your mind is processing quickly, certain signals may arrive out of order, or the brain may tag a moment as familiar before it has fully checked its own records. Think of it like your awareness being half a step behind your perception, trying to catch up with the speed of thought. But perhaps the most comforting truth is this: déjà vu is a sign that your memory system is functioning normally. The brain is constantly monitoring the world, comparing the present to the past in search of patterns. It's doing its best to keep you oriented and secure, and once in a while, when all these careful processes happen with extraordinary speed, they briefly misalign. Not in a dangerous way, not in a pathological way, simply in a human way. A reminder that the inner workings of the mind are delicate and intricate, always humming beneath the surface. So the next time you feel that gentle wave of familiarity, in a moment you know is new, you can let it pass through you like a breeze through an open window. It doesn't need to be chased or decoded. The mind is just shifting its weight, adjusting the rhythm of perception, making sure its inner instruments are still in tune. A small, harmless ripple in the vast ocean of awareness. When you're ready, we'll drift deeper into how these signals form and how the mind occasionally lets them slip through in curious ways. There is something quietly captivating about the way déjà vu settles into a moment. It doesn't arrive loudly. There is no alarm, no sudden shift in the world around you. Instead, it slips in like a soft ripple across still water. You may be listening to someone speak, or turning a corner in a place you've never visited, when suddenly the air seems to thicken just a little. Colours feel sharper for an instant. Sounds seem to echo in a familiar tone, and you feel a curious certainty, a calm but powerful sense that this has all happened before. The strength of this feeling is one of the most extraordinary parts of déjà vu. Even though you know with clear logic that you've never been here, never had this conversation, never looked at this view, the sensation insists with surprising confidence. It can feel as though the moment is dipped in a faint golden glow, touched by a kind of soft recognition that doesn't match anything in your memory. This quiet contradiction, your mind telling two different stories at the same time, is what gives déjà vu its unique emotional weight. To understand why the feeling is so convincing, we need to look gently at how the brain handles recognition. The human mind is built to notice familiarity almost instantly. It has to. Recognizing patterns, faces, voices, and places kept our ancestors safe. Even today, it helps us navigate the world without constant confusion. This sense of familiarity rises faster than conscious thought. It's like a lantern that lights up the path a split second before we see the stones beneath our feet. You don't need details for familiarity to form. You only need the impression, the atmosphere, the tone. This is why déjà vu feels so real, because it taps directly into this ancient intuitive system. The moment your brain senses something that resembles a pattern it has stored somewhere, even vaguely, it sends a quiet signal of recognition, a warm, emotional nod. The brain says, "This feels known," and it says it with the same certainty it uses when you recognize your favorite song or step into your childhood home. The signal itself doesn't know it's mistaken. It arrives with the same brightness whether it is accurate or not. What makes déjà vu strange is not the feeling, it's the absence of the memory that usually follows it. When you recognize something correctly, the mind gives you details. When you last saw it, what happened, how you felt. But in déjà vu, that next step never comes. It's as if you've opened a familiar door only to find a blank room behind it. And because the emotional signal is already glowing brightly, the absence of an accompanying memory makes the sensation feel even more mysterious. It's like hearing someone call your name in a crowded room and realizing no one actually spoke. There's also a subtle neurological timing to the experience. The brain processes information in layers. First comes the sensory information, the light, the sound, the shape of things. Then comes the emotional reaction to that information. And then, only afterward, does the mind begin to pull the threads of memory to find a matching experience. During déjà vu, these layers momentarily fall out of sync. You feel the emotional recognition before the memory retrieval system has even begun its search. By the time your brain checks for details and finds nothing, the emotional certainty has already taken hold. The glow fades slowly, long after the logic has corrected it. This is why déjà vu often feels like a memory just beneath the surface, something you can almost grasp but never quite catch. It isn't that a forgotten memory is trying to return, it's that the emotional signature of familiarity has arrived too early, without a story to anchor it. Imagine hearing the soft hum of a melody before the music begins. For a moment, your mind believes it knows the song, even though no notes have played. Another reason déjà vu feels so real is that it arises during moments when your attention is relaxed but open. You're not focused intensely on anything. Nor are you distracted. Instead, you're drifting in a gentle state of presence, walking, observing, listening. This is the perfect environment for the brain's prediction systems to wander slightly ahead, scanning patterns and shapes and moods. When one of these predictions lines up just right with the present moment, even if the match is accidental, the mind sends out a signal of recognition with full force. It's like catching a glimpse of a familiar silhouette on a distant hill, only to discover as you come closer that it's a tree shaped like a person. Déjà vu is also intensified by the brain's tendency to compress and blend memories. Experiences that share similar structures, similar room layouts, similar conversations, similar weather, similar light, are stored in overlapping ways. The mind favours efficiency. It groups things together to save effort. So when you encounter a new moment that resembles an old pattern, even faintly, the brain's memory networks may activate as a whole, lighting up like a constellation you've seen before. The details aren't the same, but the shape is. And for a brief second, the pattern recognition system mistakes similarity for identity. There's a poetic beauty in this. It means that déjà vu isn't simply a glitch, but a sign of how gracefully your mind works. It responds to the world with such sensitivity that even subtle patterns can awaken echoes of familiarity. It tries so hard to help you understand the present that, every now and then, it leans forward too quickly, offering you a memory that doesn't exist. This also explains why déjà vu often comes and goes in a heartbeat. The moment the brain completes its checks, comparing sensory details, searching memory archives, verifying context, the feeling dissolves. It's like fog retreating as the sun rises. Your mind realizes the moment is new after all, and the emotional glow gently fades. What remains is a soft aftertaste of wonder, the awareness that your inner world contains layers you rarely notice. Perhaps this is why déjà vu stays with us long after it's passed. Not because it points to another life or another time, but because it reveals something true and often hidden, that the mind is both precise and dreamy, logical and poetic. It works with astonishing speed, shaping the story of your experience in real time, always trying to keep you steady, always trying to illuminate what lies ahead. And sometimes, in its quiet dedication, it shines its lantern a little too brightly, just for a moment, before the path catches up. When you're ready, we'll drift further into the world of memory and examine what happens when its rhythm slips. A gentle exploration of why the brain sometimes reads the same moment twice. There is a soft, almost musical coordination happening inside your mind every moment you're awake. Two systems, one that senses familiarity and one that retrieves actual memories, move together like paired instruments in a duet. Most of the time they play in perfect harmony. One offers a gentle glow of recognition, and the other follows with the story behind that glow. But déjà vu appears in the precise instant when this harmony slips, when the glow arrives without the story, creating a brief tremor of confusion that feels both intimate and elusive. To understand this, imagine your mind as a vast library lit by warm lamps. The first system, the one that produces familiarity, acts like a librarian at the front desk. This librarian doesn't need to know the full content of every book. They only need to recognize the cover, the binding, the texture. The second system, the memory retrieval system, acts like an archivist deep in the stacks, the one who knows where the volumes are stored, what's written in them, and what events they describe. Together they work seamlessly. Recognition at the front desk, retrieval from the shelves. Déjà vu is the moment when the front desk lights up with recognition, before the archivist has even begun searching. A signal flashes. This is familiar. but the shelves offer no matching book. You feel the recognition as strongly as ever, yet the archive remains empty. This mismatch between two systems, one emotional and fast, the other detailed and slow, produces the uncanny sensation that something is both deeply known and completely new at the same time. The first system, the familiarity system, is rooted in a small but powerful region of the brain that specializes in sensing when something feels known. This area, nestled deep inside, doesn't need details to operate. It works on impressions, a pattern of shadows, the cadence of a voice, the tilt of a stranger's head, the arrangement of objects in a room. It analyzes the shape of experience, not its content. This allows it to work almost instantly. It's like a soft pulse that moves ahead of conscious thought. The second system, the recollection system, is more deliberate. It lives in a region that pieces together memories into coherent scenes, like a film editor assembling frames into a story. It doesn't rush. It takes its time to search through your past, looking for images, context, and meaning. Its job is to find the full memory, the who, the where, the when, and the why. Most of the time, these two systems are synchronized. If the first one signals familiarity, the second one quickly confirms it by pulling out the matching memory. But when the first system fires prematurely, when it recognizes a pattern faster than the second system can retrieve details, the brain experiences a moment of false familiarity. You feel the warmth of recognition without the certainty of memory, like hearing a distant melody you cannot place. This is the essence of the memory mismatch mechanism. There are many subtle reasons why the first system might jump ahead. Sometimes the present moment contains features that resemble fragments of past experiences. Perhaps the lighting resembles a cafe you once visited. Maybe a person's posture echoes that of someone you met years ago. Or the atmosphere of a place feels like somewhere you can't quite recall. Your familiarity system notices these similarities immediately. It sends an emotional signal of recognition before your conscious mind even realizes what it's reacting to. But the recollection system cannot find the corresponding memory because the moment is new. The resemblance is only partial. It's the shape of a memory without the memory itself, like a silhouette that looks familiar from far away but dissolves into something different as you approach. This mismatch can also happen when your mind is moving more quickly than usual. When you're tired, overwhelmed, or processing many things at once, the brain's timing can shift slightly. The familiarity signal may arrive a fraction of a heartbeat earlier than the recollection pathway can respond. Even a delay this small, no more than the blink of an eye, can produce the sensation of déjà vu. It's a momentary misalignment of two processes that usually dance in close unison. Some researchers describe this as a kind of soft glitch, not in a mechanical sense, but in a poetic one. The brain is constantly predicting what comes next, preparing to interpret the world even before your conscious awareness catches up. If this prediction aligns too well with the present or arrives too soon, the familiarity system may fire without the memory system's involvement. It's not an error in function. It's simply a sign that the brain is working with remarkable speed, sometimes faster than its own rhythm can fully coordinate. This explanation also helps clarify why déjà vu is more common during periods of rapid learning, stress, or transitions. Times when the brain is forming new memories quickly or juggling many tasks. When you're moving through new environments, meeting new people, or adjusting to unfamiliar routines, your familiarity system becomes more active, scanning patterns more intensely to keep you oriented. With so much activity, the likelihood of a tiny misalignment increases, and with it, the possibility of déjà vu. What makes this mechanism so fascinating is that it doesn't require a stored memory to generate the feeling of familiarity. The brain can create the sensation on its own, purely by recognizing fragments or patterns that resemble the structure of past experiences. It's as though the librarian at the front desk sometimes rings the bell simply because the binding of a new book resembles one that passed through years ago. And because the familiarity system carries emotional weight, it signals safety, recognition, and belonging. The feeling is strong, more powerful in that brief flash than the logical knowledge that the moment is new. The emotional system works faster than the narrative system. The glow comes before the story, and without the story, your awareness pauses in quiet confusion, wondering how something so new can feel so known. But this confusion is gentle. It lasts no longer than a breath. As soon as the recollection system completes its scan and confirms that no matching memory exists, the glow fades. The moment returns to normal, and you're left with a faint impression that time has slipped, or perhaps that you've slipped slightly outside of time. Seen this way, déjà vu becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes a glimpse into the delicate timing of thought, a reminder that your perception of the world is built from multiple layers moving together in constant coordination. Most of the time, these layers align perfectly, giving you a smooth and continuous sense of reality. But once in a while, when the mind is moving quickly, one layer steps forward before the others, and in that tiny gap, déjà vu is born. When you're ready, we'll drift gently into a related region of the mind, where electrical sparks and brief surges in the memory network reveal even more about why this strange sensation appears. If déjà vu is a whisper of familiarity without a story behind it, then scientists have long wondered, what part of the mind creates that whisper in the first place? Where does it begin? How does it spread? And why does it sometimes appear for only a heartbeat and then fade, while in other people it can repeat in loops? To answer these questions, neuroscience turns to a group of people whose brains offer a clearer window into this phenomenon. Individuals who experience temporal lobe epilepsy. Now, when we mention epilepsy, it's important to move gently. The type we're talking about here often involves extremely small, momentary electrical surges in a part of the brain near the temples, surges so brief and mild that many patients remain fully conscious. These are called focal seizures, and in many cases the person experiencing them may appear only slightly distracted, lost in a momentary daydream. But within the brain, something fascinating is happening. The temporal lobe, the region involved in these small surges, is a key center for memory, emotion, and recognition. It holds the hippocampus, which stitches together the details of memory and the surrounding tissue responsible for sensing whether something feels familiar. When a tiny electrical surge passes through this area, lasting perhaps only a second or two, it can activate these circuits unexpectedly, like a soft flash of lightning illuminating a landscape for a moment. Patients with temporal lobe epilepsy often describe sensations that sound incredibly similar to everyday déjà vu. Sudden waves of familiarity, moments that feel repeated, emotional echoes that feel both vivid and ungrounded. These episodes can be strong, lingering, or recurring because the electrical activity is more pronounced than the subtle, micro misfires that occur in healthy brains, and this is where the mystery begins to unravel in a beautifully grounded way. By observing these patients, scientists learned that déjà vu can be triggered directly by stimulation of the memory networks. In other words, you can create déjà vu simply by activating the region that governs familiarity, even without a memory attached, not by summoning a forgotten experience, not by unlocking a hidden past, just by activating the signal that says, "This feels known." It's almost poetic. Recognition itself can be separated from the memory that normally explains it. This is one of the deepest clues we have about déjà vu. The brain maintains the feeling of familiarity as its own process, distinct from the memory that supports it. When the signal fires alone, the result is déjà vu. Imagine a set of wind chimes. Usually they ring when a breeze passes through, but if you gently tap them with your finger, they will sing even when the air is still. The sound isn't tied to the wind, it's tied to the instrument. In the same way, familiarity isn't tied to memory, it belongs to the systems that generate it. When those systems are nudged, even slightly, they produce their soft music. In clinical settings, when surgeons and researchers apply a mild electrical pulse, so gentle it doesn't hurt, to the temporal lobe of a patient during mapping procedures, the patient may suddenly say, "I've lived this moment before," or "This conversation feels repeated," or "The room seems familiar." This happens even though the environment hasn't changed. What changed was the internal spark. These findings are not meant to imply that typical déjà vu is a seizure. It isn't. The experience in everyday life is far lighter, far quicker, and far subtler. It's a puff of wind compared to a small gust. But the resemblance shows us that both experiences arise from the same orchestra of circuits. The difference is simply the intensity and duration, and this tells us something profound. Déjà vu is not a supernatural glitch, it's a natural feature of the brain's memory architecture, revealed more clearly in the rare moments when the circuitry is activated in unexpected ways. Patients also describe something else that aligns with everyday déjà vu, the emotional colouring of the experience. They report a soft sense of significance, as though the moment matters more than usual. They may feel a ripple of nostalgia, curiosity, or even mild unease. That emotional tone comes from the amygdala, a nearby region responsible for attaching feelings to experiences. When the electrical surge touches both familiarity and emotion together, the result is a moment that feels heavy with meaning, even though the meaning is undefined. In healthy brains, this emotional colouring arrives during typical déjà vu as well. You may feel a quick flutter, nothing overwhelming, just a sensation that seems to point beyond the moment. This emotional signature is why déjà vu stays with us long after it fades. Even though the moment is ordinary, the feeling is anything but. Temporal lobe epilepsy helps scientists see this phenomenon in slow motion, as though turning the pages of a book frame by frame. It reveals the source, the pathways, and the way these circuits light up. It shows that déjà vu arises not from a metaphysical breach in time, but from the delicate interplay between recognition, memory, and emotion. When recognition fires by itself without memory to anchor it, the mind briefly enters a state where the present feels layered with echoes, and it's remarkable how gentle this mechanism is. Even in the more intense episodes experienced by patients, the sensation is usually more curious than frightening. It's only when episodes repeat frequently that they become a clinical concern. In everyday life, the phenomena we call déjà vu is simply a very mild version of these same processes, like a whisper of electricity gliding across the memory circuits, too soft to trigger anything more than a flicker of familiarity. Another insight from these studies is the role of timing. When researchers slowed down the electrical stimulation, applied it more softly, or targeted slightly different parts of the temporal lobe, the feeling changed. Sometimes it became déjà vu. Sometimes it became jamais vu. The eerie sense that something familiar suddenly feels strange. Sometimes it became a fleeting memory flash. This reminds us that the brain's experience of time and memory is tied to the precision of how these circuits fire. A shift of only a few thousandths of a second can reshape a moment entirely. This delicate timing helps us understand why everyday déjà vu is so unpredictable. It needs an incredibly specific alignment of brain states, a moment of perfect chance. This is why you can't summon déjà vu at will, and why it doesn't repeat on command. It appears when the brain briefly moves faster than its own rhythm, a tiny spark in a vast network. And perhaps the most comforting lesson is this: déjà vu is a sign of a healthy, active memory system, one that is constantly comparing the present to the past in search of meaning. It shows that your brain is attentive, perceptive, and deeply engaged with the world. A momentary misfire doesn't weaken the system, it reveals its beauty. When you're ready, we'll continue drifting deeper into these gentle quirks of recognition, exploring how the brain's incredible pattern-detecting abilities can sometimes run ahead of the story, creating these brief illusions of repetition. For all its mystery, déjà vu often begins with something simple. Your brain is a master of patterns. It has spent your entire life learning the shapes of experiences, how rooms are usually arranged, how conversations tend to flow, how light falls through certain kinds of windows, how footsteps echo in narrow hallways. These patterns help you move through the world with ease. You don't need to analyze every detail consciously. Your mind predicts them for you, weaving a soft continuity from moment to moment. But this remarkable ability can also lead to curious missteps. Imagine walking through a hotel corridor. You've never stayed in this building before, but the layout feels familiar. Carpets that stretch in long stripes, doors spaced evenly, the low hum of air conditioning, the faint scent of detergent or warm light. None of these details match a past experience exactly, but together they resemble the architecture of a dozen other hotels you've walked through. Your familiarity system senses the similarity immediately. It recognizes the shape of the scene. And even before the recollection system can check its files, the emotional glow of "I know this" flickers to life. This is where déjà vu often begins, not with a hidden memory, but with a pattern that echoes something your brain already understands. Our familiarity circuits are incredibly sensitive. A single fragment can awaken recognition. The angle of a staircase, a rhythm in someone's voice, the way two people are standing together. It doesn't take much. The mind is built to respond quickly, and so it lights up before the slower memory pathways have time to confirm whether the match is real. It is a little like standing at a distance and seeing someone whose walk resembles that of an old friend. For a moment your brain is convinced. The silhouette, the posture, the pace. It all feels right. But as you get closer, the illusion dissolves, and you realise the resemblance was only a trick of the moment. Déjà vu is similar, except instead of recognising a person, you recognise the shape of an experience. Pattern recognition is so deeply ingrained in the brain that it often happens before you're even aware of it. This predictive ability helped humans survive long before we relied on logic and conscious reasoning. Our ancestors needed to sense danger before they saw it, remember paths through forests without thinking, notice subtle changes in their surroundings instantly. This ancient skill lives on in you. It guides your eyes, your attention, your reactions. Often, these predictions are so accurate that you never notice them at all. The world feels consistent because your brain is constantly smoothing the edges. But when prediction outpaces perception, when your brain anticipates a pattern faster than the detailed memory system can respond, the result can be a false signal of familiarity. You feel you've lived the moment before, though the moment is entirely new. This process becomes even more intriguing when we consider how often life repeats itself in structure, if not in detail. You may have never stood in this exact kitchen before, but you've stood in hundreds like it. You may have never heard this specific sentence, but its rhythm echoes countless conversations. You may have never walked through this particular street, but the afternoon light filtering between the buildings resembles many afternoons you've known. The brain doesn't compare scenes pixel by pixel. It compares them as wholes, as atmospheres, as familiar shapes. This is why déjà vu is more common in places that share architectural or sensory patterns: schools, airports, office buildings, long corridors, staircases, supermarkets, city streets lit at dusk. Our environments often mirror one another in ways we don't consciously notice. A hallway in Tokyo may evoke a hallway in Paris. A dim cafe in Lisbon may carry the emotional mood of one you visited as a child. The details are different, but the pattern, the contour of the experience feels the same. The brain also forms what we might call template memories, soft mental blueprints built from repeated experiences. Every bedroom you have slept in contributes to a template of how bedrooms feel. Every dinner conversation contributes to a template of how gatherings sound. When a current moment fits one of these templates too closely, even if it's the first time you're seeing it, the familiarity system may fire with a sense of recognition that feels absolute. In these cases, the recollection system has no specific memory to retrieve. It doesn't have a past event to offer. Instead, it finds itself confronted with a moment that feels familiar for reasons it cannot identify. And because the brain dislikes unanswered questions, the feeling becomes oddly intense. You know you don't know the moment, but the feeling insists that you do. It is a cognitive tug-of-war, gentle, quick, and often unnoticed by anyone but you. This mechanism also helps explain why déjà vu often appears when you are in a state of mild distraction. When your attention is divided, the brain relies more heavily on patterns than details. You may be tired, stressed, or preoccupied. In these states, the familiarity system becomes more active, scanning your surroundings for anything predictable. Meanwhile, the recollection system slows, conserving energy. The result is a moment when the pattern detector is working at full speed while the archivist lingers far behind. That small imbalance allows the emotional glow of familiarity to slip through unchallenged. Another fascinating layer of this process involves the way the brain compresses time. When two experiences resemble each other closely, especially if they occur close together in time, the mind sometimes blends them without realizing it. This blending can create a sense that the current moment belongs to a memory that hasn't yet formed, or one that isn't quite distinct. It is as though the brain briefly feels it is stepping into the same moment twice, even though only one is real. And underlying all of this is an elegant truth. Your brain is constantly striving to make sense of the world with the least effort possible. It wants to find order, consistency, and predictability. In most cases, this efficiency helps you feel grounded, but occasionally when the similarity between moments is too close, or when your focus is slightly off balance, the mind leans into an assumption with a little too much confidence. It generates the feeling of recognition before verifying the facts. This is why déjà vu feels like a memory, yet contains no images. Why it feels momentous, yet leaves no trace. Why it is both ordinary and extraordinary. You are experiencing the power of a brain that can detect subtle patterns in milliseconds, patterns so intricate and layered that even a slight overlap with a new moment can light up the emotional circuits of familiarity. And because these circuits evolve to signal safety and belonging, the feeling is compelling. It carries the emotional certainty of real memory. As we drift further through this quiet examination of the mind, we'll look at moments when the brain's timing shifts again, times when signals arrive out of order, creating echoes that feel like repetitions. In these tiny misalignments, déjà vu shows us just how delicate and astonishing the machinery of thought truly is. There are moments when déjà vu seems to bloom not from memory, but from timing, a slight slip in the rhythms of perception. The brain, despite all its elegance, does not process reality as one continuous stream. Instead, it works in pulses, in tiny waves of information arriving and being interpreted almost, but not quite, all at once. Most of the time, these waves overlap so smoothly that you feel the world unfolding seamlessly. But occasionally something shifts by only a few thousandths of a second, so small you could never consciously detect it, and the mind experiences a moment twice. This idea, sometimes called the double perception delay, offers a gentle explanation for why a new moment might feel eerily familiar. It suggests that the sensation isn't a memory at all, but the same perception echoing through awareness in two passes. The first passes too softly or too quickly to register as conscious experience. The second arrives in full clarity, and because it feels like a repeat of something sensed just before, something your mind didn't fully grasp, you feel that strange tug of repetition, a quiet whisper of again. To picture this, imagine watching a ripple move across the surface of a lake. If the wind is perfectly still, the ripple passes once and is gone. But if there's a faint second breeze following behind, the water might shift almost the same way a moment later. The second pattern feels familiar because it echoes the first, even though the ripples are happening for the very first time. In the brain, this delay can happen when one part processes sensory information just a little sooner than another. Light, sound, and touch all travel through different pathways. They don't arrive at the same speed, and they don't get interpreted at the same depth or by the same circuits. Under normal conditions, the brain synchronizes these signals almost perfectly. You hear, see, and feel in harmony. But when you're tired or overstimulated or your attention is drifting, that synchrony can loosen. The first pass of perception might be so faint, so close to the threshold of awareness, that you don't consciously register it. Then, a fraction of a moment later, the brain processes the same scene again, but more fully this time. The result is a subtle echo. The mind believes it is recognizing something it has already experienced, even though it is simply experiencing the same moment twice in rapid succession. It helps to remember that consciousness lags slightly behind sensation. What you perceive as now is not truly the exact instant in which things happen. It is the brain's best reconstruction of events that have already occurred. Most neuroscientists agree that awareness runs a little behind reality, like a caption slightly delayed under a film. This means that the mind is constantly stitching together snapshots from just before. If two snapshots are extremely similar and arrive too close together, the brain may mistake the second one for a memory instead of a live moment. This isn't a flaw. It's simply the way a biological system organizes information, smoothing out the world into experience. The tiniest lag, no longer than a heartbeat split into hundreds of beats, can create a ripple that feels like familiarity. Another gentle timing illusion happens when you shift your gaze quickly. When your eyes jump from one point to another, your brain temporarily suppresses vision to prevent a blur. This creates a silent pocket in awareness, a small gap. Once your eyes land, the brain fills that gap with the scene you're looking at, stretching it backward in time. This creates a mild temporal distortion, where the new moment feels slightly longer than it should. It's the same mechanism behind the stopped clock illusion, where the second hand seems frozen just after you first look at it. This stretching and shifting of perception can contribute to déjà vu as well. If the brain fills a short blank moment with the scene in front of you, the scene may feel as though it began before you were aware of it. That soft mismatch, believing you experienced something earlier than you actually did, can create a sense of repetition. It's not memory, it's the mind smoothing a wrinkle in time. Microlags also occur between the hemispheres of the brain. The left and right sides communicate constantly through a bridge of fibers, passing sensory information back and forth. Usually this exchange is immediate, but if one hemisphere receives or processes information slightly earlier, the second hemisphere may treat the subsequent arrival as a repeat. Even a difference too small for conscious detection can create a phantom feeling of, "I've seen this." This phenomenon is not unique to déjà vu. Many people have felt a similar sensation when hearing a sound echo faintly in a room, or when reading a line in a book that reminds them of a line they saw a moment before. The brain is extraordinarily sensitive to repetition, even imagined repetition. It's designed to notice patterns, and when it detects two similar impressions close together in time, it may treat the second as a memory of the first, even if no real memory exists. Fatigue, stress, and emotional overload make these micro-delays more likely. When your mind is juggling many tasks, it may process sensory information less efficiently. Signals can take slightly different routes, arrive at different speeds, or get momentarily slowed by distraction. People often report more déjà vu when travelling, moving through unfamiliar environments, or adjusting to new routines, all situations where the brain is working hard to keep track of many details at once. It's in these moments that timing slips are more likely to happen, creating little echoes in perception. There's a gentle comfort in knowing that déjà vu can arise from something as human and harmless as timing. It means your mind isn't malfunctioning. It's moving quickly, perhaps even too gracefully, racing ahead of itself in its effort to interpret the world. When the rhythm of perception quickens beyond its usual pace, awareness tries to catch up. And in that tiny breath of time where sensation brushes past attention before looping back, the feeling of repetition appears. Another layer to this is the brain's constant prediction. Your mind is always anticipating what will happen a moment from now. It predicts where your gaze will land, what words someone might say next, how a room will look when you turn your head. If the prediction aligns perfectly with what actually happens, your brain may treat the present moment as though it has already passed. It feels like memory because the brain rehearsed it before the sensory input arrived. When the rehearsal is too accurate, it becomes indistinguishable from the real experience for a fraction of a second. So déjà vu, in this explanation, is not a glimpse into another life or another timeline, but a brief moment when your brain's internal rehearsal becomes so precise, so aligned with the unfolding present, that the boundary between anticipation and perception blurs. You feel that the moment is repeating, but truly, the mind is simply recognizing its own prediction. These timing-based explanations don't diminish the wonder of déjà vu. If anything, they highlight the delicate beauty of perception. Reality, as you experience it, is constantly being assembled in real time, a living tapestry woven from sensation, memory, and prediction. Most of the time, this tapestry is seamless, but when the threads shift by even a hair's breadth, a tiny fold appears, and the present moment shadows itself. When you're ready, we'll continue drifting deeper into the landscape of memory and perception, exploring how soft electrical sparks and fleeting fragments of recognition can create these uncanny echoes in the mind. There are times when déjà vu feels less like a repetition of the present and more like a faint echo of something half remembered, as if the mind briefly brushes against a memory that isn't fully formed. It is as though a fragment of recognition drifts upward from somewhere deep inside you and dissolves before reaching the surface. This sensation has nothing to do with real memories returning, yet it carries the emotional colour of remembering. To understand why, we need to look gently at another layer of the mind's architecture. The way memory pathways sometimes flicker, misfire, and awaken without a story attached. Think of memory as a network of tiny lanterns scattered through a vast landscape. When you recall something, Intentionally, your first bicycle, a birthday, a friend's voice. Many of these lanterns light up together. Each illuminates a different piece, an image, a feeling, a sound, a time, a place. When the lanterns glow in harmony, the memory feels whole. But these pathways are sensitive. They can flicker on their own without forming a complete picture. A single lantern may glow for just an instant, prompted not by a real memory but by an accidental spark. This spark is what neuroscientists sometimes describe as a misfire. Imagine being in a library after closing time. The shelves are quiet, the lights are dim, and the building seems asleep. Then, suddenly, one small lamp on a distant table flicks on. No one is sitting there, no one is reading, and it doesn't illuminate anything around it. But for a moment it suggests that something is happening, even though the room remains empty. A neurological misfire feels much the same, a single light in the memory network turning on without context. This can happen for many gentle reasons. The brain is constantly organizing, reinforcing and pruning memories even while you're awake. It revisits past experiences, updates them, strengthens some connections and weakens others. During these maintenance routines, pathways can activate silently, just enough to send a faint signal upward. Most of the time, these flickers go unnoticed. But if a moment in your present environment resembles the emotional tone of one of these flickers, even vaguely, the two signals may overlap in your awareness. The result is a brief but compelling feeling of familiarity, like seeing a shadow that reminds you of someone you once knew. This kind of misfire doesn't involve any stored memory returning whole. There is no hidden file being unlocked, no forgotten scene floating to the surface. Instead, it is simply the emotional colouring of recognition emerging without its accompanying story, much like a scent of perfume reminding you of someone's presence without recalling their face. When these flickers appear, they often blend with another phenomenon the brain engages in constantly, confabulation, or the gentle filling of gaps. We normally associate that word with elaborate memory errors, but in truth, the mind performs small, harmless versions of this all the time. If it senses a flicker of familiarity, it may subtly try to weave meaning around it, even if no meaning exists. This is not deception. It's the brain's attempt to maintain a smooth and coherent experience. If something feels familiar, the mind tries to justify the feeling, and when it cannot, you experience a moment of puzzling déjà vu. This mechanism becomes more pronounced when you're tired, sleep-deprived, or mentally overwhelmed. Fatigue weakens the coordination between different memory regions, making it more likely for signals to appear on their own. Think of a dimming light bulb that flickers a little more often when the power is unstable. The flicker itself is harmless. It's simply more visible when the system is under strain. Another contributing factor arises from the way the brain encodes emotional moments. Highly emotional experiences are stored more vividly because the mind interprets them as important. The emotional component of memory, what you felt at the time, is often stored independently from the details of the event. This means that the emotional flavour of a past moment may be reactivated even when the memory itself is not. If the emotional signature of a current moment resembles one of these stored emotional traces, the brain may send a signal of recognition, even though no specific memory is attached. For example, imagine standing in a quiet room one evening. The warm tone of the lighting, the coolness of air on your skin, the subtle hush of background noise. These sensations might match the emotional atmosphere of a night from years ago, even if nothing else about the situation is the same. The emotional lantern flickers, producing that soft, "I know this" feeling, and déjà vu blooms and fades before your mind can understand why. These tiny misfires also intersect with predictive processing. The brain doesn't simply react to the world, it constantly anticipates what will happen next. It's always comparing what it expects to see with what it actually sees, like someone humming a melody a heartbeat before the music begins. If the prediction and reality align too perfectly, the mind may briefly treat the predicted moment as though it has already happened. Combined with a memory flicker, this can create a layered sensation, part recognition, part anticipation, part emotional echo that feels like déjà vu. One of the simplest, yet most profound insights from studying these misfires is that memory is not stored like video recordings. It is stored like threads woven into a tapestry, a colour here, a texture there, a feeling in one corner, a shape in another. When one thread is touched by accident, the entire tapestry may shiver softly, sending vibrations through parts that were not meant to awaken. Déjà vu is not the tapestry itself, it is the ripple moving through it. Another gentle aspect of memory fragility is how easily the brain blends similar experiences. If you've been in many similar rooms, walked similar streets, or heard similar conversations, your mind stores these experiences in overlapping patterns. The brain avoids redundancy. It compresses memories, grouping them into categories. When a present moment activates one of these categories too quickly, the brain may briefly mistake the general category for a specific memory. It feels like remembering, but the sensation has no anchor. This blending intensifies under stress, when the brain prioritizes quick interpretation over careful analysis. You may experience déjà vu more often when traveling, when adjusting to new environments, or when juggling many thoughts. These are times when memory fragments fire more often, pattern recognition works harder, and predictive processing accelerates. What all of this reveals is that déjà vu is not a sign of memory failing, but a sign of memory working almost too efficiently. The brain is so good at forming associations, recognizing emotional cues, and predicting patterns that occasionally the machinery runs ahead of itself. When familiarity arrives before the reasons for familiarity, you feel the echo without the memory. You feel the emotion without the story. A hint of something that seems like the past, yet belongs entirely to the present. If déjà vu is a door, it is not a door to another life or another time. It is a door into the subtle inner workings of your own mind, a moment when the machinery becomes visible, like seeing the gears of a clock turn when the light hits at just the right angle. And now, as we drift gently from these quiet sparks and misfires into the deeper construction of time itself, we'll begin to see how the brain arranges not just memory, but the flow of moments, stretching, compressing, and stitching them together into the story you call reality. Time feels like something outside of us, something that flows steadily whether we pay attention to it or not. Yet the experience of time, its pace, its texture, its rhythm, is not carried by the world alone. It is built inside the mind moment by moment, like a soft pulse rising and falling beneath the surface of awareness. To understand why déjà vu and other temporal illusions happen, it helps to explore these internal pulses, these quiet clocks that tick in ways far different from the ticking hands on a wall. Inside your brain, time is not measured with a single instrument. Instead, several systems work together, each tuned to a different scale of experience. One keeps track of short intervals, the length of a blink, the pause between footsteps, the rhythm of speech. Another watches over larger spans, helping you estimate minutes or hours. Yet another helps coordinate movement, giving you the sense of timing needed to walk smoothly, to catch a ball, or to nod at the precise moment in a conversation. These systems overlap gently, forming a constellation of timekeeping rather than a single clock. If you imagine the mind as a quiet house at night, These clocks are like small hourglasses placed in different rooms. One sits in the hallway, measuring the rhythm of breath. Another rests on a desk in the study, marking how long you've been lost in thought. A third glows faintly in the living room, watching over the broader flow of your day. None of these hourglasses keep identical time, yet together they help you navigate the world smoothly, giving shape to the experience of now. One of the regions involved in this delicate process lies deep at the centre of the brain. It is responsible for sensing very short intervals, the briefest slices of time. This structure helps you understand when to move, when to pause, and how long a moment lasts on the level of seconds. If you ever tap your fingers to music or feel the rhythm of footsteps inside your body, this system is quietly guiding you. A second region, tucked toward the back of the brain, helps coordinate movement through time. It is part of the reason you can walk without constantly thinking about each step, or turn your head smoothly when someone calls your name. It ensures that actions unfold with a sense of fluid continuity, as though time is something your body can hold in its hands and shape without effort. The third region, in the front of the brain, deals with longer intervals. It gives you the sense of minutes passing, or the impression that a conversation has lasted an hour. This system does not track time as a clock does. Instead, it estimates duration by using attention, emotion, and memory as guides. When you're deeply focused, this region collapses time into what feels like a single breath. When you're anxious or waiting for something important, the same region stretches time, making every minute feel heavy and slow. Together, these systems form your internal architecture of time. They're always working, always adapting, always straining toward a smooth sense of the world. But because these clocks are biological, not mechanical, they're sensitive to everything. Your mood, your attention, your energy level, your environment. They shift and drift gently depending on the state of your mind. And when these clocks drift relative to each other, when one hourglass tilts slightly faster, or another slows under the weight of distraction, you may feel tiny distortions in the flow of time. Moments may seem too quick or too long. The present may feel as though it contains echoes of another moment. Familiarity may blend with prediction. This is where the soft overlap between time perception and déjà vu begins. Imagine walking through a doorway. Your short interval clock registers the physical act of stepping forward, while your longer duration clock interprets how long you've been in the building. If something about this interaction doesn't align perfectly, if your attention shifts, or the lighting resembles another moment, or your mind briefly resets its timing, your brain may treat the present as if it began a little earlier than it did. This small drift can make the moment feel repeated, familiar, or somehow out of sequence. The brain does not measure time the way a stopwatch does. It does not hear seconds ticking. Instead, it constructs time like a series of small sketches, drawn quickly, layered together to form a continuous image. If a sketch is missed or repeated, if two sketches overlap too closely, the mind may interpret this as a familiar moment returning. Time becomes a tapestry, and a single misplaced thread can create the illusion of a loop. This is one reason why people experience déjà vu more often when they are tired or overwhelmed. Fatigue disrupts the internal clocks. Some hourglasses tilt faster, others slow down. The rhythm becomes irregular. Because these systems rely on harmony with one another, even a tiny shift can create a sensation that time itself has slipped. The world doesn't change, but your perception of the world takes a small step sideways. There's also the emotional layer of timing. If you've ever felt that a moment stretched into something larger than itself, during a meaningful conversation, or during a moment of fear, you've experienced the brain's emotional influence on time. Emotion can accelerate or decelerate the internal clocks. it can magnify moments or shrink them. And because déjà vu often appears during periods of emotional engagement, hearing a story, stepping into a room with a certain mood, walking through a place that feels calm or atmospheric, it is intimately tied to these emotional shifts. The brain's sense of time is also influenced by memory. When recalling past events, the mind reconstructs time rather than replaying it. A happy weekend may feel like it passed in a blink, while a difficult hour may feel endless. The same reconstruction happens in the present. Your internal clocks use memory as a reference, comparing the current flow of experience to the rhythm of similar moments in the past. If the new moment matches a past rhythm too closely, the familiarity system may send a signal before the details catch up. In this way, your clocks don't just keep time, they interpret it. They decide what matters, what should be stretched, what should be condensed. They use your senses, your emotions, and your past to assemble the flow of the present. This is why time feels different depending on how you live it. And when these clocks hum in perfect synchrony, time feels smooth, almost invisible. But when they drift, echo, or misalign, when the hourglasses in the house of your mind tip at different speeds, you may catch glimpses of temporal illusions, moments that feel repeated, seconds that bloom or collapse, echoes of familiarity shaped not by memory, but by the rhythm of time itself. As we continue, we'll drift even deeper into this quiet architecture, exploring how the brain transforms time into narrative, and how this narrative creates the illusions, distortions, and mysteries that make our experience of reality so rich and strange. For most of your life, time has probably felt like a straight, unwavering path. One moment leads to the next, each step following the one before it in a clean, orderly line. Morning rises into afternoon, days follow one another, memories stack themselves neatly behind you while the future stretches out ahead. It's an intuitive, comforting idea that time flows like a river moving steadily downstream. But the mind does not experience time this way. Not really. Your sense of time is not a passive reading of an external clock. Instead, it is something your brain actively builds piece by piece, constructing a smooth narrative from fragments of perception, emotion, and memory. Time feels like a line only because the brain works tirelessly to make it appear that way. Imagine your awareness as a lantern shining on small patches of experience. Each patch is illuminated for only a moment before fading, replaced by the next. There is always a gap, a tiny blank space between the patches, yet your mind stitches them together so seamlessly that you never notice the breaks. The effect is like watching a film, a series of still images played quickly enough to create the illusion of motion. You do not see the individual frames, you see the story they create. The brain does something similar with time. It gathers sensory information, arranges it, fills in missing details, and blends everything into a continuous flow. This is not deception, it is a form of protection, a way to ensure that the world feels stable and understandable. If you had to consciously process every microsecond, time would feel jagged and overwhelming, like walking on broken glass. Instead, your mind smooths the edges, creating a steady path you can walk along. This constant stitching means that your experience of time is not the unfolding of the world, but the unfolding of your awareness of the world. The difference is subtle, but profound. It explains why the same minute can feel short or long, why memories overlap and blur, and why temporal illusions, like déjà vu, can slip into consciousness so effortlessly. Think of a book. You do not see the story all at once. You absorb it line by line, turning pages as you go. The story feels continuous, but only because your mind bridges the gaps between sentences and chapters. You never pause to question how the narrative moves from one scene to the next. You simply follow along. Time works similarly. It is the mind's most complex story, written in real time, shaped from countless pieces assembled with such skill that you seldom see the seams. This narrative quality of time explains why humans instinctively describe their lives as stories, with beginnings, middles, turning points, and endings. The brain loves narrative because narrative creates order, and order creates comfort. Even your memories are stored more like chapters than recordings. The details shift, the meanings change, the emotional texture deepens. Memory is not a file to be retrieved, it is a scene to be reconstructed. This means that your experience of time is subjective, not absolute. Two people can live the same hour and feel it pass at completely different speeds. A child may feel a summer afternoon stretch endlessly, while an adult may find that the same hours vanish like breath from a window. A moment of joy can feel suspended in air, while moments of waiting can feel like dragging weights. And yet, despite these variations, your mind works constantly to make the story feel smooth and linear. It fills gaps with assumptions, it softens abrupt transitions, it rounds the corners of time like a sculptor polishing stone. If you shift your attention, the mind quietly adjusts the narrative arc. If you blink, it fills in the missing instant. If you look away, it writes continuity into the moment you return. You rarely notice these adjustments because the brain is so skilled at them. But sometimes, the system reveals itself. When you experience déjà vu, a tiny glitch in this narrative process becomes visible. The brain briefly misplaces which part of the story it's writing. It tags the present moment with the emotional signature of the past before checking the details. For a breath, the narrative loops back on itself, like a sentence whispered twice. It feels as though the timeline has folded, even though nothing supernatural is happening. It is simply the narrator inside your mind reading ahead too quickly. This illusion of linear time also breaks down during moments of deep absorption. When you're fully engaged, reading a book, solving a puzzle, listening to music, your attention narrows and your internal sense of pacing shifts. Time may compress, shrinking minutes into seconds. When you return to ordinary awareness, you might be surprised by how much time has passed. This happens because the brain builds time from attention, not from clocks. When attention is focused, fewer narrative frames are generated, so time feels shorter. The opposite occurs during moments of fear or anticipation. When something captures your emotional systems, waiting for test results, sitting through turbulence, hearing a sudden noise, your internal narrator slows down. It writes more frames per moment, stretching the narrative. It is the same reason why memories of stressful events feel so vivid. The mind lays down more detail, more texture, more emotional context. It makes these moments feel longer because it believes they matter. This introduces a fascinating paradox. Time feels linear only because the brain works so hard to make it feel that way. But the way the brain builds time is anything but linear. It is flexible, fluid, and creative. It accelerates and decelerates, compresses and expands, rearranges and blends. Time inside the mind is not a river. It is a story being told in real time, always being adjusted as new experiences arrive. Once you understand this, déjà vu becomes even more interesting. It is not merely a glitch in memory. It is a brief moment when the storyteller inside you loses its place, rereads a line, or anticipates a scene before the scene unfolds. The mind, which usually hides its editing process so carefully, reveals a glimpse of the machinery behind perception. For just a heartbeat, the story doubles back on itself. But this isn't something to fear or fix. If anything, it's a soft reminder that your experience of the world is far more dynamic than it seems. Time is not something you pass through. It's something your mind paints around you, stroke by stroke. As we drift onward, we'll explore how emotions interact with this storytelling, how certain moments are lit up so brightly they freeze in place, and how others dissolve into the background with hardly a trace. There are moments in life that seem to glow more brightly than others. You can probably remember an instant, a look, a sound, a sentence spoken at the right moment that felt so vivid it might as well have been carved into the air. Time seemed to gather itself around that moment, holding it still. And there are other moments that slipped past before you even knew they'd arrived, dissolving into the background like a breath on a mirror. These experiences are not illusions caused by the outside world. They are created within the quiet, attentive chambers of your mind, where emotion shapes the very structure of time. Your brain does not measure time the way a clock does. Instead, it uses experience itself as the raw material for duration. When a moment is emotionally charged, joyful, frightening, surprising, deeply meaningful, the mind records it with more detail, more sensory threads, more colour, more texture. The richer the impression, the longer the moment feels. Scientists sometimes call these flashbulb memories, but the phrase doesn't quite capture the softness of the experience. It is less like the flash of a camera and more like a lantern being lit suddenly in a dark room, warm, bright, and unforgettable. The light seems to hold still for a breath before the world returns to motion. Think back to a moment that felt suspended in time. Perhaps you were standing in a room when someone spoke a sentence that changed something in your life, or you were watching someone you love laugh, and the entire scene felt illuminated from within. Or maybe you were startled by a loud noise, and for a heartbeat, everything around you appeared sharper. The edges of objects more defined, the sounds more distinct, your breath caught in your chest. In those instants, the brain lays down memory with intense detail, and because time is built from these details, the moment feels longer, denser, more substantial. Fear plays a particularly powerful role in stretching time. When you are afraid, your attention narrows, becoming almost tunnel-like. The brain begins recording more information per second, preparing to protect you. Even though the outside world hasn't slowed, your internal world becomes hyper-real, registering each sensation with heightened clarity. This creates the impression that time is expanding. You feel as though you're moving through molasses, even though everything is happening at the normal pace. A gentle example: imagine walking across a street when a car honks unexpectedly. For a split second, your attention sharpens instantly. The colours around you feel brighter. You register the direction of the sound, the distance of the car, the texture of the pavement under your feet. Later, when you recall this moment, it feels longer than it actually was. The mind remembers the density of the experience, not its speed. The opposite effect happens during immersion. When you become deeply engaged in something, listening to a story, painting, working on a puzzle, walking through a quiet forest, your awareness becomes absorbed. In these moments, the brain records fewer frames of experience. It allows attention to rest gently on one thread instead of scanning every detail. Because fewer impressions are stored, the period feels shorter in memory. Hours can pass in what feels like minutes, and when you finally look up, you're surprised by how much time has slipped through your fingers. This is why a calm afternoon spent doing something you love can feel fleeting, while a stressful 15 minutes can feel like an hour. Emotion, attention, and meaning are the ingredients that determine the thickness of time. Memory and time perception are deeply intertwined. When the brain forms memories of an event, It isn't just storing facts, it is sculpting your sense of how long that event lasted. A moment with strong emotion or vivid detail leaves behind a larger memory, so it feels longer in retrospect. A moment with little emotional weight leaves behind a smaller memory, so it feels shorter. And because time is shaped by your internal narrative rather than external measurement, these impressions often feel more real than what the clock tells you. This interplay becomes particularly interesting when we consider déjà vu. The feeling of déjà vu is not tied to the actual length of a moment, but to how the mind processes the fragments within it. If a present moment contains emotional cues similar to a past moment, perhaps the way the light falls or the rhythm of someone's voice, the emotional signature may activate a sense of familiarity even if the details do not match. The mind might treat the new moment as though it has already been lived, because the emotional shape aligns with earlier experiences. In this sense, emotion can act like a thread connecting two distant patches in the tapestry of memory, making the present feel like a quiet echo of something before. It doesn't matter that the events themselves were different. What matters is the emotional resonance. The brain recognizes the tone, the temperature, the atmosphere, and sends up a signal of familiarity. Another way emotion influences time is through anticipation. When you're waiting for something, especially something important, the mind leans into the future, stretching time in the present. Each second feels longer because your awareness is split between now and what is coming. The mind becomes impatient, measuring the moment not by what is happening, but by what is not happening yet. This stretching effect can cause moments to feel uncanny, as though time is resisting movement. Joy, on the other hand, can collapse time entirely. Think of a night with close friends, or a conversation that flowed effortlessly. The brain records these moments as unified experiences, not as a sequence of separate minutes. The internal clocks quiet themselves, allowing the mind to drift in a gentle stream. Later, remembering these moments feels like remembering a single warm glow, rather than a series of ticking seconds. There is a metaphor that fits well here. Time is not a rope that stretches behind and before you. It is a fabric woven from the threads of your emotions and perceptions, tightened in some places, loosened in others. Your brain is constantly weaving this fabric, choosing where to add colour, where to pull the threads closer, where to leave space for softness. These distortions are not flaws. They are signs that your experience of reality is sensitive, responsive, and alive. The mind prioritizes meaning over measurement. It shapes time around what matters most to you, giving weight to what illuminates your thoughts and letting the rest drift gently into the background. As we move forward, we'll explore how these timing illusions become even stranger, how certain events feel stretched simply because they are unusual, and how quick shifts in awareness can create the eerie impression that time has paused, even if just for a heartbeat. There are moments when time seems to stretch like soft taffy, pulling itself thinner and thinner around the edges of an unusual event. And there are other moments when time seems to pause altogether, almost as if the world is holding its breath. These sensations do not come from the outside world changing speed. They arise from the brain's quiet habit of shaping time around what matters, what surprises, and what catches you off guard. Two gentle illusions capture these ideas especially well: the oddball effect and chronostasis. The oddball effect appears when something unexpected interrupts a pattern. Imagine you're watching a series of images, let's say circles flashing on a screen at regular intervals. Suddenly, in place of one of the circles, a bright square appears. Even though it appears for the same amount of time as the circles, it feels as though it lingers longer. Your mind registers it with more weight, more detail, more attention. It is different, and the brain amplifies difference. This effect appears everywhere in daily life. A sudden flash of a bird wing in an empty sky, a car horn in a quiet street, a friend laughing in a way you haven't heard before, a dog barking in the distance while everything else remains still. The unusual moment is not longer, but it feels longer because your brain widens its attention, trying to collect more information. Novelty commands more cognitive space than repetition. If you've ever been startled by a sudden noise or witnessed something strange and found yourself thinking, that moment felt long, you were touching the oddball effect. The brain slows its internal clock for a breath, stretching the moment so it can gather, interpret, and store what it sees. Time bends around surprise. Now let's turn to another gentle illusion, one that feels almost magical: chronostasis. This is the name scientists give to the stopped clock illusion. The moment when you glance at a clock and the second hand seems frozen for longer than it should. It doesn't really stop, of course. Instead, your brain is smoothing a gap in perception. To understand this, imagine turning your head quickly toward something. During the rapid movement of your eyes, the brain temporarily suppresses vision to prevent the world from blurring. It's a protective feature, a way to maintain clarity. For that instant, your awareness goes quietly blind. But when your eyes settle, the brain fills in the missing time by stretching the first stable image it sees. It extends that single moment backward, creating the impression that it lasted longer than it actually did. When you look at a clock, the first second after your eyes land feels elongated because it is filling the space left by the blink of attention. Time hasn't paused. You simply experienced a moment without noticing, and your brain patched it seamlessly, like a tailor smoothing a fold in fabric. Chronostasis doesn't just happen with clocks. You may experience it when turning to look at someone entering a room, or when glancing toward a passing car, or when shifting your attention during conversation. That brief stillness, that almost imperceptible pause, is the mind filling in the gap created by the movement of your gaze. Both the oddball effect and chronostasis highlight something profound. The brain is not passive. It does not simply record the world. It reorganizes, stretches, and rewrites time to maintain a sense of stability or to highlight moments it thinks are important. And because these adjustments happen below awareness, time can feel inconsistent, flowing like a river that changes speed depending on how you touch it. These illusions also reveal why déjà vu and its cousins appear so naturally in human experience. When the brain stretches a moment because it is unusual, it creates a longer internal frame, a moment that feels richer, more detailed. If a later moment shares even a small piece of that emotional or sensory texture, the brain may treat it as familiar, even if it's entirely new. It's as though the memory of the unusual moment casts a long shadow that another moment can accidentally wander into. In the case of chronostasis, time's apparent pause can create a brief sensation of disconnection, a tiny hiccup in the sequence of perception. When the brain fills in the blank with a stretched version of the present moment, the result can feel like a repetition, a moment that seems to have lasted before it actually began. This gentle rearrangement can, in rare cases, prime the mind for déjà vu, especially if the filled-in moment resembles something emotionally charged or familiar. Let's explore a few everyday examples to make this feel softer and more relatable. Picture yourself standing beside a quiet road, waiting to cross. You glance left, then right. For a heartbeat, the road seems unusually still, as though time has paused to let you judge the next steps. But in reality, your eyes were moving quickly, and your brain simply filled in the missing instant. The world didn't pause. Your awareness took a breath you didn't notice. Or imagine watching a flock of pigeons scatter suddenly from a rooftop. The moment when they take flight feels longer, feels significant, because it catches you off guard. The motion is sudden, unusual. Your mind widens its attention, and the moment stretches. Time bends gently, creating a frame that feels larger than the others around it. The same happens when something breaks a pattern you've grown accustomed to. A sudden laugh in a library, a sharp scent in a familiar room, a child dropping a toy that makes an unexpected sound. These pattern breaks feel like longer moments because your mind collects more detail. The world hasn't slowed, but its portrait becomes denser in your awareness. Even birds in flight, which seem weightless and unpredictable, become catalysts for temporal shifts. One moment you're walking quietly, the next you catch a small flutter of wings from the corner of your eye. The bird arcs across the sky, and that motion feels briefly suspended. Your mind magnifies it, turning it into a kind of cinematic moment that lingers longer than the rest of your day. These illusions aren't errors. They're signs that the brain prioritizes significance over precision. Time, in your experience, is not a constant. It is sculpted by your attention, molded by your emotions, and shaded by the unexpected. Chronostasis gently reminds you that time has seams, little stitches that fade when viewed from a distance. The oddball effect reminds you that your mind listens closely for change, ready to stretch a moment if it might contain something important. And together, these illusions show that time, far from being rigid, is one of the most flexible sensations the mind produces. It lengthens to hold surprise. It pauses to fill its own gaps. It rearranges itself to maintain continuity. As we drift onward, we'll explore temporal distortions that take us even further from the familiar. Moments when things that should feel known suddenly feel strange, and how the brain can momentarily lose its grip on the sense of recognition altogether. If déjà vu is the strange feeling of having lived a moment before, then jamais vu is its quiet, uncanny twin. The feeling that something familiar has suddenly become foreign. It is the moment when the world slips sideways, not because you've seen too much of it, but because your mind momentarily forgets how to recognize what is right in front of you. A word you've used 1,000 times suddenly looks wrong. A room you know intimately feels distant. A routine task feels strangely unfamiliar, as though your hands have forgotten what they've practiced for years. Jamais vu is gentler than it sounds. It is not confusion or illness or danger. It is simply a moment when recognition falters, when the brain's system for labeling something as known takes a brief pause, and in that pause the everyday becomes mysterious. Imagine writing the same word over and over again. Say, door, light, or table. After a few repetitions, the word begins to lose meaning. Its letters start to look odd. The sound of it becomes hollow. You might think, is this even a real word? This is one of the most common forms of jamais vu. The brain, having processed the same pattern repeatedly in a short span of time, stops recognizing it as meaningful. The loops grow so tight that the familiarity system resets itself, as if stepping back from what it's been staring at for too long. This temporary loss of recognition happens because the brain is constantly balancing two forces: familiarity and novelty. Too much familiarity in a short period can overwhelm the system, causing it to momentarily disengage. It's a protective mechanism, almost like your mind blinking. When a pattern repeats too predictably, the familiarity circuits, those little lights that normally whisper, "I know this," take a rest. And when they rest, the known world becomes briefly unknown. Another example of jamais vu can appear when you drive home along a route you've travelled countless times. You arrive at your destination and suddenly think, wait, how did I get here? You know you passed the same stoplights, the same intersections, the same buildings, but the experience feels distant, as though you were watching someone else drive. This is not a lapse in memory. It is your brain shifting into a form of automatic mode, performing a familiar task with such ease that the recognition circuits go quiet, leaving the experience feeling oddly unfamiliar when recalled. It can also occur during moments of fatigue, stress, or distraction. When the brain is tired, the system responsible for tagging sensations as known may not fire when it should. A sentence may look strange, a commonly used object may seem out of place, or the face of someone you love may, for the briefest instant, feel new. These moments pass quickly, usually within seconds, but they can leave a lingering impression of strangeness, as if your mind briefly stepped outside of itself. Jamais vu reveals something profound about recognition itself. It is not automatic. It is an active process, governed by delicate patterns of neural activity. When these patterns pause, even for a heartbeat, the world loses its labels. Objects remain the same, but the sense of familiarity surrounding them softens, like fog drifting over a landscape. It also shows how fragile recognition can be. We often assume that knowing something is simple, that the brain keeps a tidy catalogue of things we've learned or seen, but recognition depends on tiny signals firing in just the right way. The mechanism is so subtle that repeating a word a few too many times can disrupt it. This fragility is not a weakness, it is a sign of how dynamic the brain truly is. Recognition isn't a static stamp, it is a living process. This phenomenon becomes particularly interesting when you consider its relationship with déjà vu. Déjà vu is the feeling of familiarity without the memory. Jamais vu is the absence of familiarity despite having the memory. They are two sides of the same coin, both illustrating the same truth. Familiarity is separate from knowledge. You can remember something without feeling that you know it, and you can feel that you know something you've never seen before. The emotional signature of recognition operates independently of the facts. One gentle way to understand jamais vu is to imagine walking into your living room and seeing everything exactly as it should be. The couch in its usual place, the lamp casting its usual glow, the books arranged as always, but feeling for a breath as if you were seeing it through the eyes of a stranger. Nothing is wrong, nothing has changed, but the quiet thread of recognition that normally ties you to the space is missing. The moment feels unmoored. This can happen in language, in perception, and in memory. If you repeat a person's name, your own name even, it can begin to sound foreign. If you stare at your own signature too long, the curves and lines lose their meaning, transforming into shapes rather than symbols. These small distortions remind us that meaning is constructed, not inherent. The brain builds familiarity every time you see something, and sometimes it simply needs a rest. Jamais vu may also appear during emotional transitions. For instance, walking into a place where you've shared many memories, your childhood home, an old school, a friend's apartment, can sometimes feel strange if your emotional connection to it is shifting. The space hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. Recognition bends under the weight of meaning, and the familiar becomes newly distant. These moments are subtle, but they speak volumes about how our inner worlds shape the way we see outer worlds. One of the most important things to understand is that jamais vu is normal. Like déjà vu, it does not signal anything wrong with the mind. Instead, it reflects the brain's extraordinary flexibility. In its constant effort to balance novelty and familiarity, emotion and logic, attention and memory, the mind sometimes recalibrates. And in those recalibrations, we glimpse the mechanics behind awareness, a brief look at the gears turning beneath consciousness. Jamais vu invites us to consider how much of reality is shaped not by what we see, but by how the brain interprets what we see. It shows that the sense of knowing something is not fixed. It is renewed each time we encounter it. This can be disorienting, but also quietly beautiful. The familiar can become new again. The ordinary can become mysterious. A word can become a shape. A room can become a landscape. A memory can become a moment waiting to be rediscovered. As we move forward, we'll explore yet another kind of almost memory. The sensation of standing on the edge of recall, close enough to touch a memory's glow but unable to bring its form into focus. There is a peculiar kind of tension the mind sometimes creates, a gentle strain, a reaching. You know the feeling well. A word is hovering at the edge of your awareness, a name, a phrase, a memory. You can almost sense its shape. You know the first letter, or the rhythm of the syllables, or the emotional colour it carries. You lean toward it internally, as though tilting your head might help. But the memory refuses to step into the light. It lingers just beyond reach, suspended like a soft glow behind a curtain. This is presque vu, the experience of being on the verge of remembering. It is neither remembering nor forgetting. It is the space in between, where memory stirs but does not awaken fully. Many people describe it as standing in a doorway, feeling the warmth of a room on the other side but not being able to enter. Others say it's like trying to hold water in cupped hands. Some trace of meaning remains, but the substance slips through. The memory is there, yet inaccessible. This almost memory arises from the delicate way the brain retrieves information. Memory is not stored as a single complete object. It is distributed across networks, sounds in one place, images in another, meanings in yet another. When you recall something, these networks activate together, lighting up like lanterns strung across a dark landscape. When the retrieval process is smooth, the lanterns glow at once, and the memory appears whole. But in presque view, only some of the lanterns turn on. You may get a hint of sound, or the beginning of a word, or the emotional tone of the memory, but the rest stays dark. The incomplete pattern creates a tug inside your mind, a feeling of closeness without clarity. This is why the experience feels vivid, even though the memory is missing. You're not imagining the memory. It is genuinely activating, but only in fragments. Think of a lighthouse on a distant shore. You can see its beam sweeping through the night, but you cannot see the tower itself. You sense its presence, but not its form. This is how almost memories work. The beam is there, the structure is hidden, and for a moment the mind lives inside this partial illumination. The tip of the tongue phenomenon is a familiar example. You know a word. You've used it many times. You might even remember the context where you last used it, or the feeling it carries. Yet the word itself stays just out of reach. The brain knows enough to signal, you know this, but not enough to deliver the answer. It's as if the retrieval networks are misaligned by the smallest fraction. The path to the word is open, but a gate in the middle is closed. This sensation often happens with names, because names are stored differently from other kinds of words. They are linked more through association than meaning, which makes them harder to retrieve when the network connection weakens. You may remember the person's face, the conversations you've had, the places you've met, but the name refuses to appear, and yet the more you try to force it, the further it slips away. This is because effort itself disrupts the delicate retrieval process. When you relax, when you let go, stop pushing, shift your attention, the pathways open again. The name rises softly into consciousness, as though it had been waiting behind the curtain the whole time. This delayed arrival is why people often exclaim the forgotten word at sudden random times, during a walk, in the shower, in the middle of another task. The memory wasn't gone, it was simply waiting for the right conditions. Presque view also reveals something about how the brain handles meaning. Often, before recalling a memory, The mind retrieves its emotional colour first, the feeling associated with it. You might sense warmth, excitement, nostalgia, or frustration before the actual memory appears. It's like recognising someone's scent before seeing their face. Emotion is one of the deepest threads woven into memory, so it tends to surface sooner. But because emotion alone cannot reconstruct the full memory, you're left with a sensation of something being right there without being complete. This phenomenon ties closely to the idea of predictive processing, the brain's constant habit of anticipating what should come next. When you're trying to recall a memory, the mind begins to predict the missing pieces, offering guesses and approximations. You may think of similar sounding words or related memories. The brain is attempting to fill in the gaps, like a painter adding faint brush strokes to a canvas where the full picture has not appeared. This is why almost memories feel restless. The brain is working, but not quite aligning the necessary circuits. A single misplaced thread prevents the tapestry from forming. Ever had the experience where a phrase feels familiar, but you can't remember where you heard it? Or when a melody drifts through your thoughts, yet you can't place the song? This is the same mechanism at play. The emotional or auditory trace is present, but the context is missing. The lanterns are glowing, but the landscape has not yet emerged. Presque vue can also appear during moments of creative insight. A thought feels close, so close you can almost touch it. Writers, musicians, scientists and artists all describe this sensation. The idea hovering like mist, the shape of a solution forming, without revealing itself fully. Creativity often lives in this space, between knowing and not knowing, between fragments and clarity. This almost knowing is not a failure. It is part of the mind's way of assembling meaning. Sometimes the brain needs more time to gather the pieces. Sometimes the pathways simply haven't been used recently and need a moment to warm up. Sometimes emotion precedes content, and the mind must catch up by stitching details into place. In a way, presque vue is the gentle opposite of déjà vu. Déjà vu is familiarity without memory. Presque vue is memory without familiarity. Déjà vu feels like stepping into a moment twice. Presque vue feels like standing just outside a moment that refuses to open. Both reveal the same truth. The brain separates the feeling of knowing from the act of knowing. Presque vue also emphasizes how delicately balanced memory systems are. A slight shortage of attention, a moment of distraction, or even a shift in emotional state can cause the retrieval networks to light up unevenly. The result is an experience that feels both intimate and distant, familiar and foreign, frustrating and fascinating. And perhaps the most comforting thing to remember is that almost memories do not disappear. They simply wait for a better moment. The mind has a quiet rhythm of its own, and when the rhythm aligns, the missing piece returns, often when you least expect it, often accompanied by a small sigh of relief, as if the memory itself has been found after wandering off on a brief walk. As we drift onward, we'll turn our attention to other strange forms of familiarity, moments when sounds, smells, and even dreams create echoes in waking life, shaping a sense of recognition that flows from deeper and older parts of the mind. There are forms of familiarity that do not arrive through sight or memory of places, but through the subtler senses, the tone of a voice, the faint trace of a scent, the emotional atmosphere of a moment. These sensations often feel softer than déjà vu, yet they arise from the same delicate machinery inside the mind. They remind us that familiarity is not one single experience but a spectrum of echoes, each emerging from a different part of perception. Among these echoes are déjà entendu, déjà senti, and the dream overlap, three gentle illusions that show how deeply the mind blends the present with the traces of moments that came before. Déjà entendu is the feeling that you've heard something before, a phrase, a melody, a rhythm of speech, when you logically know you have not. It may appear when you're listening to someone speak and suddenly feel that their words are echoing a past conversation that never happened, or when you hear a piece of music for the first time and a certain chord progression feels uncannily familiar, like an old friend stepping out from behind a curtain. This illusion often arises because the auditory system is extraordinarily good at detecting patterns. The brain doesn't just hear sound, it anticipates the next note, predicts the next rhythm, and fills in gaps with expectations. If the actual sound aligned closely with a pattern your mind has stored, perhaps from songs you've heard long ago or voices that share a similar cadence, the familiarity system may activate. You feel a spark of recognition, even though no true memory follows. It is the sound of familiarity without the story behind it. Sound is emotional. It moves through the brain with a certain softness, stirring memories that are often more feeling than detail. A familiar tone, a repeated rhythm, or an echo of a childhood melody can create a moment where the present seems to overlap with the emotional colour of the past. Déjà entendu is not a memory returning. It is the brain awakening a feeling it has associated with certain kinds of sound. A similar phenomenon happens with déjà senti, the feeling that you have sensed something before, not through hearing or sight, but through smell, touch, or emotion itself. This can happen when you step into a room and instantly feel as though the air reminds you of something, though you cannot place what. Or when the scent of a flower or a passing perfume seems to tug at a coil of memory that never fully unravels. Scent is especially powerful because it has a direct pathway to regions of the brain involved in emotion and memory. A single aroma can evoke strong feelings without calling up any specific memory. You may feel nostalgia, warmth, or melancholy in response to a scent you cannot name. The emotional signature arises without the details, creating that gentle illusion of "I've felt this before," even though no clear memory surfaces. Déjà senti can also arise from internal sensations, an emotional mood, a heaviness in the air, or the feeling of stepping into a familiar atmosphere. You might enter a cafe and feel that the whole place carries the emotional temperature of a memory you cannot retrieve. It is as though the mind recognizes the emotional pattern, even though the moment itself is new. These experiences remind us that familiarity is not only visual or cognitive, it is deeply sensory and emotional. The brain holds thousands of emotional impressions that do not have specific memories attached to them. When a present moment matches the emotional shape of one of these impressions, the familiarity system may activate. The feeling arrives before the memory, and because the memory is missing, the emotion becomes the entire experience. But perhaps the most mysterious contributor to these sensations is the overlap between dreams and waking life. Dreams are transient worlds built from fragments of memory, imagination, and emotion. They are vivid but unstable, meaningful yet slippery. Most fade quickly upon waking, but their emotional residue can linger quietly within the mind. Sometimes, when you encounter a place or moment during the day, perhaps a hallway, a conversation, a quiet street, the emotional tone of a dream you've had before may echo through it. Even if you do not remember the dream, even if its details dissolved as soon as you opened your eyes, the emotional signature may remain tucked away in the deeper layers of memory. When a waking moment aligns with that emotional tone, you may feel a wave of soft familiarity. This is the dream overlap, the experience of meeting in daylight a moment that resembles, emotionally or atmospherically, something you once encountered in sleep. The present feels like a cousin of a dream you cannot recall. It's like walking into a scene where the shadows feel familiar even though you've never seen the room. The mind compares the living moment with a dream fragment stored somewhere beyond reach. You sense the connection, but the content remains hidden. Dream overlap is not supernatural. It is simply another way the brain stores and retrieves emotional memory. Dreams often encode experiences in symbolic or atmospheric form, not as literal images. Your mind might store the feeling of standing on a wide beach at dusk without storing the beach itself. Later, when you walk down a quiet hallway washed in soft light, the emotional rhythm may match the dream's rhythm, and your familiarity system may whisper, "You've been here." It is a quiet echo, a faint resonance between two worlds your brain builds from the same raw materials. These variants of déjà vu, déjà entendu, déjà senti, and dream overlap each remind us that familiarity is a sense just like sight or hearing. It is not limited to memories. It can arise from patterns of sound, patterns of scent, patterns of emotion, or the lingering shadows of dreams. It is a system constantly scanning, comparing, and interpreting, trying to help you understand the world by connecting it to what it already knows. They also show that the brain's map of reality is not static. It shifts, blends, and rearranges itself constantly, pulling threads across time. The past, the present, and the shadows of dreams all exist as overlapping layers within the mind. When one layer aligns with another, even by accident, the result can be a moment of quiet strangeness, a whisper from the unconscious, a sensation of "I've known this before," even when you haven't. As we drift deeper into this gentle architecture of perception, we'll turn toward a mechanism that ties all these temporal illusions together, a process at the heart of how the brain anticipates the world, fills in gaps, and constructs its version of reality moment by moment. Every moment you experience is shaped not only by what your senses gather, but by what your brain expects to gather. Long before a sound reaches your awareness, long before an image settles in your vision, long before a sentence finishes on someone's lips, your mind is already predicting what will happen. It is sketching the next frame of reality before the world paints it in. This quiet anticipation is known as predictive coding, and it lies at the heart of many of the strange temporal sensations we've explored. Déjà vu, jamais vu, almost memories, and even the dreamlike echoes that drift through waking life. To understand predictive coding, imagine your mind as a storyteller who is always a few lines ahead of the script. This storyteller has learned the rhythm of your experiences, how people usually respond, how rooms tend to feel, how conversations unfold, how footsteps sound on different floors. It uses these patterns to anticipate what comes next. Most of the time, the predictions are so accurate that you never notice them. The story feels smooth, continuous, alive. But every so often, when the prediction is too precise or slightly off, you feel a brief tug in consciousness, a flicker, a disturbance, a moment that feels somehow double. At its core, predictive coding is the brain's way of reducing uncertainty. The world is vast and full of information, far more than your senses can process in real time. To navigate it efficiently, the brain creates models, soft blueprints built from memory, emotion, and pattern recognition. When you see a hallway, your mind doesn't analyze each tile. It predicts hallwayness and fills in details only if something deviates from expectation. When you hear a sentence, your mind forecasts the shape of the next word before it's spoken. When you touch a surface, your brain anticipates its texture before your fingers land. This constant flow of guesses is not something you control. It happens beneath awareness, like the gentle hum of machinery behind a wall. The predictions help you feel grounded, safe, and oriented. They keep you from being overwhelmed by raw sensory chaos. But because they are generated so quickly, and because they rely on past experience, they sometimes overlap with the present in ways that create illusions of familiarity. One of the simplest examples is walking into a room where the lighting, scent, and arrangement of objects resemble another room you've known before. Before your conscious mind takes in the details, your brain has already predicted the feeling of the space. If the prediction aligns too closely with the incoming sensory information, the mind may treat the moment as though it has already happened. The prediction is so accurate that it blends with perception, and the brain briefly mislabels the present as memory. This is a foundation of déjà vu, the experience of the mind recognizing its own expectation. Predictive coding also explains why déjà vu often arises during repetitive or patterned environments: hotel corridors, parking garages, stairwells, supermarkets. These places follow predictable designs. Your brain has walked through thousands of similar shapes before, so it leans heavily on its stored patterns. When a present moment fits perfectly into one of these internal templates, recognition fires too early. The prediction, not the perception, becomes the source of familiarity. On the opposite side of the spectrum, jamais vu can emerge when the prediction system falters. If the brain expects something to feel familiar but the incoming information doesn't align perfectly, perhaps because of fatigue or distraction, the mind may momentarily lose its grip on the sense of knowing. The present moment feels unfamiliar because the prediction did not match the input. The world takes on an uncanny clarity, as if seen through new eyes. Presque vu, the experience of being on the verge of remembering, also relates to this predictive machinery. When you try to recall a word or memory, the brain begins to predict the missing information based on partial cues. You sense the shape of the memory, the emotional tone, the rhythm, the first letter, because these predictions activate before the full memory does. The mind anticipates the memory before retrieving it. When the retrieval system doesn't catch up, the prediction remains suspended, creating the tension of almost knowing. Even dream overlap is touched by prediction. Dreams often reflect the emotional templates the brain uses to interpret the world. They borrow familiar tones, atmospheres, and patterns, combining them into symbolic scenes. When a waking moment matches one of these dream-born emotional patterns, the predictive machinery lights up, whispering that the moment is familiar. Recognition arises from the dream's emotional residue rather than from lived memory. In all these cases, the brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing its job, building the world ahead of time so that you can move through it with ease. But this extraordinary efficiency comes with a quiet side effect. Sometimes the prediction feels indistinguishable from the present, and sometimes the present feels like it doesn't match any prediction at all. These tiny mismatches create experiences that feel surreal, timeless, or strangely doubled. A gentle metaphor might help. Imagine you're walking down a path at dusk and the lantern you carry casts a warm glow ahead of you. The glow illuminates stones, branches, and curves in the trail before you reach them. Most of the time, the path matches what the lantern reveals, but occasionally the light falls on something unexpected, a sudden dip, a shadow, a misplaced leaf, and your mind adjusts. The adjustment creates a tiny ripple in awareness, a moment of recalibration. Predictive coding works much the same way. The lantern is always shining ahead. The mind is always comparing what it expects to see with what it actually sees. When the two align too closely, déjà vu appears. When they fail to align, jamais vu appears. When alignment hovers just out of reach, presque vu appears. When alignment echoes dreams, dream overlap appears. In this way, predictive coding becomes the unifying explanation for many temporal illusions. It shows that reality as you experience it is not delivered raw. It is woven, edited, interpreted. Your brain doesn't simply record the world, it composes it. It sketches the outlines and fills them in. It guesses what should come next and adjusts when it's wrong. Most of the time, this happens so smoothly that you never sense the invisible choreography. But in the rare moments when the dance falters or moves too gracefully, you catch a glimpse of the system at work. And that glimpse can feel supernatural, even though it is entirely natural. It can feel like time bending, even though time remains steady. It can feel like memory whispering, even though nothing is being remembered. It can feel like a breach in the present, even though the present is whole. What you're truly sensing in these strange moments is the mind noticing itself, the storyteller seeing its own pen moving across the page. As we drift into the final chapter of this exploration, we'll take a gentle step back and look at what these illusions, misfires, and predictions tell us about living inside time, how understanding them can soften your experience, bring calm awareness, and reveal the mind's quiet, beautiful creativity. There is a gentle comfort in realizing that the strange moments your mind creates, those flickers of déjà vu, the slips of jamais vu, the half-remembered glow of presque vu, the echoes of sound and scent, the soft overlaps between dream and daylight, are not errors. They are part of the way your brain breathes. They are reminders that awareness is not a straight line but a living fabric, woven from memory, prediction, emotion, and quiet internal rhythms. When you begin to understand these phenomena, not as glitches but as expressions of the brain's remarkable creativity, a kind of peace settles in. You start to see that the mind is not malfunctioning. It is doing something delicate and extraordinary. Your experience of reality is shaped by countless small processes working together in harmony. Memory pathways light up like strings of lanterns. Predictive circuits paint faint sketches of the world before your senses fill in the details. Emotional centers tint the edges of moments with warmth or urgency. Internal clocks measure time not with ticking seconds, but with the flow of attention and the depth of meaning. Each moment you live is stitched together from these overlapping mechanisms, each adding its own subtle thread. When a moment feels repeated, as in déjà vu, it is because these threads briefly cross in a familiar pattern. When a familiar thing feels new, as in jamais vu, it is because the thread of recognition slackens for a breath. When a memory hovers just out of reach, as in presque vu, it is because some threads have lit while others remain dim. These sensations are woven into the very nature of being conscious. They reveal the machinery behind the tapestry, the quiet pulse of the mind, working behind the scenes. One of the most powerful ways to live alongside these experiences is to let them be. When déjà vu appears, you don't need to chase it or decode it. You can simply acknowledge the moment, recognize that your mind is briefly stepping ahead of itself, or catch in a faint echo from its own patterns, and let the feeling fade on its own. When jamais vu sweeps over you, you can meet it with gentleness. It is only a momentary pause in the system that labels things as known. When the label returns, the world becomes familiar again. Understanding these phenomena creates space. Instead of reacting with confusion or worry, you develop a calm curiosity. You begin to appreciate that the mind is fluid, flexible, and alive. It shifts shape, it changes perspective. It lets moments blend into one another or separate into fragments. And in these shifts, you can find something soothing, an invitation to be present without needing every experience to fit into a perfect narrative. Mindfulness often becomes a natural companion to this understanding. When you slow down and pay attention to your breath, or the weight of your body, or the sound of the world around you, you start to sense the texture of time more gently. Moments stretch and soften. The constant chatter of prediction quiets. the mind's habit of jumping ahead loosens. The internal clocks settle into a more even rhythm, like ripples smoothing across a lake after a stone is thrown. Mindfulness doesn't erase déjà vu or other illusions. It simply creates a steadier foundation beneath them. Instead of being carried away by the sensation, you notice it arise, peak, and pass. You observe the architecture of your awareness without clinging to it. You become a witness to your mind's creativity instead of a passenger surprised by every turn. And when you observe carefully, you begin to notice how memory and time weave themselves into meaning. The moments you hold on to most tightly, the ones that feel rich, vivid, and long, are often the ones that shaped you. A meaningful conversation, a sunrise glimpsed through quiet fog, a difficult goodbye, a sudden realization, a moment of joy so full it made the whole world feel bright. These experiences stretch time not because of clocks, but because of significance. The brain expands them, returning to them, laying down layer after layer of meaning. In contrast, the countless ordinary moments, the steps you take, the rooms you pass through, the conversations that drift by, compress into something smaller, a background hum. They are not unimportant, they form the fabric of your life, but the brain doesn't need to store them with the same detail. It smooths them, letting time flow quickly, saving space for what matters most. When you look at your life this way, time begins to feel less like a force pressing against you, and more like a medium you can shape. You cannot slow the clock outside, but you can expand or soften the way you experience a moment. Attention makes time larger, presence deepens it, meaning anchors it, and gentle awareness turns each moment into something vivid and whole. Science still has many questions about how the brain creates subjective time. Researchers wonder how internal clocks synchronize, how emotional states alter timing, how memories are encoded, how predictions arise, and why certain illusions, like déjà vu, appear in the precise ways they do. The answers are still unfolding, like the gradual unfurling of a fern. But one thing is clear: subjective time is not a flaw, it is a feature. It allows the mind to organize experience, prioritize meaning, and filter the endless sensory stream into something you can understand. Perhaps most importantly, these phenomena remind you that you're not a machine observing the world. You're a living, breathing presence inside it. Your experience of time is part of what makes you human. You are shaped by moments, by the way they feel, by the memories they leave behind, and by the quiet distortions that give them texture. The slight bending of time inside your mind is not a weakness. It is a sign of the mind's capacity for imagination, for meaning-making, for beauty. And so, as we reach the close of this journey through the architecture of memory and time, perhaps you can let yourself rest a little more gently in your own experience. Let the strange moments be strange. Let the familiar moments be familiar. Let the world unfold without needing to catch every thread. And when you feel time stretch, or collapse, or echo, know that your mind is simply doing what it has always done, shaping reality into something you can hold. Your mind is a quiet architect stitching moments into meaning. And in that soft, ongoing work, something profoundly human takes shape. A life lived in the subtle glow between memory and time,